Hey everyone, happy Friday. It is going to be a long weekend. We're going to have so much fun today. You're going to really enjoy this show. I'm Amy Novakovich, CEO and co-founder of Nova Wealth Management. Follow me on Twitter at Novakovich Amy. And also check out our YouTube channel. We've got some quick 90-second videos there for you as well. Also, our website, novawealthmanagement.com. You can contact us through there. This is Finance Friday. This is the show where we give you the information that you need to grow, to save, and protect your wealth. And then we also give you the information and the armor that you need to not get taken advantage of. I'm going to start today off with a question. How many of you have credit, have bad credit? Well, the answer is everybody has credit. Everybody has a financial reputation. That's what credit is. So I brought in the expert, a good friend of mine, Credit Carl, CEO and founder of Credit Blueprint. He rocks the house. Thank you so much for being with me, Carl. I appreciate you being here.
Amy, the pleasure is all mine. I'm excited to talk finances on Friday.
I know. We kind of, we'll banter back and forth. We have some different opinions. You guys will get to hear, some different ways of thinking here. I want to point out that I am sick and I'm very sorry if I sound stuffy and if I sniffle, and I have baby wipes to blow my nose and I have hot tea in 90-degree weather. Just saying. We're going to see how this goes. I'm going to take notes, Carl. Okay. So I have a whiteboard that I'm going to be putting all your tips on. And then what I do is I'll do like a 90-second YouTube video to kind of summarize everything, all your tips.
Beautiful.
I want to start.
Wait, you're gonna do the summary? Oh, perfect.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. So I want to start first with, tell me about your business. Tell me about how you started your business, because there's a lot of business owners that watch this, and I'm always curious about how you got into this business and why you started.
Well, I got into this business on a failed drug test. I was in the mortgage business from 1998 to 2008. I was a mortgage guy, order taker. Things were great. 2008.
For a corporation? So for a big corporation.
Yeah, GMAC. Yeah, I was working for GMAC.
Okay.
Yeah. We used to refi like GM executives and stuff. It was easy money for a long time. And then 2008 hit, the bottom fell out, and my income went from a couple hundred to under 100. And I was like, the run's over. So I jumped out, tried to partner up with a buddy that was in the credit repair space. I was over there a couple months, and people were mad. Like, customers in process were like mad. They didn't like us. We weren't doing a good job. I was like, this is horrible. So
I feel you.
Yeah. So I tried to go running back to the mortgage business, which is all I knew my adult life for 10 years. And I had to take a routine drug test. I couldn't pass the test because the cup was like this gigantic cup, and I couldn't fill it up. They suspected foul play because I didn't complete the test the day they asked me to, which forced my hand to leave that business and start in the credit repair business and really learn it. So
this is a fact that failure can truly be a blessing.
100%. It's all how you view that. Yeah. So I fail the test. I jump into credit repair, and I bring my wife over. My wife's like my better half. She was doing mortgage processing. So she comes and starts working for us in the credit repair business. And she figures it out. She's like, I know how to move scores up so the customers aren't mad at us. And guess what, Carl? We can do this.
And they get a better rate.
Yeah, they get a better deal. They're not mad. They start to buy the house they want. They don't have to rent. They're getting out of the 25% interest rate on their vehicle. So she's like, you can start your own business. And I said, I'm a corporate America guy. I have no clue what you're talking about.
Right. You're speaking to a lot of people right now because they think that same thing. They think because they're at corporate America and they're stuck that they have to stay.
Yeah. And I really felt that. And if it wasn't for her pushing me, saying I could start my own company, I wouldn't. So, with us together making a decision, I packed it up and I said, I'm starting my own company. I'm going to figure it out. And that's what I did. I actually and the story gets even more interesting from there, which is I had to fall behind on my mortgage payments to start my company, Credit Blueprint. So 8 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I'm a month behind, and I'm just an optimistic person. I've always been that way. And I'm like, well, we're going to strike gold. And in month 2, 3, and 4, I'm going to make money and I'll get caught back up. So, and by the way, when I left that company, I had nothing. Like the economy had hit. I lost everything. So I didn't have any money to start this
So this
company.
is in like '09, maybe?
Right. It was 2011 because I had worked for this other guy for a couple of years trying to figure out how credit repair,
Oh, okay. Okay.
how do you raise scores? So yeah, I lose. I'm a month behind on the house, and I never get caught up. 6 months into the business, 6 months of missing mortgage payments. They knock on the door. They take the house. So now
No.
you got a credit guy who's trying to help people with their credit,
Who
and
now has a
they took my house.
foreclosure?
They took my house.
No way,
Yeah.
Carl. I did not know this.
So the message is very clear, Amy.
Holy cow.
Anyone listening should not trust me. Okay.
Whatever. No, because you've been through it. You've experienced it, right? A foreclosure. Okay, so now you have my attention. So how in the heck do you rebuild your credit from a foreclosure, which I know as being a former banker, that stays on your credit pretty much forever. There's a point where it doesn't really affect your credit score anymore, but it's always there, is it not?
Yeah. If it's like a clean foreclosure where there's like a sheriff's sale, like right away, like the property I was in was like a property that was it wasn't like a vacation area. So they were going to do a sheriff's sale and get rid of it right away. And then the foreclosure really starts from the date that the sheriff came in and sold it and somebody took it over.
Okay.
And that's when the clock starts ticking. But, I knew, Amy, that time heals all wounds in life. And the same thing applies to your credit. I thought, well, I'm a really good example because there's nothing I can do about this foreclosure. Like you can't get the foreclosure off the credit report, but I can make sure that the rest of my credit is intact. I can have a lot of credit cards and make sure that I'm managing them properly. I can have an automobile, even though it might not be at a great interest rate, and make sure that I'm managing that properly. And I did that for the first 2 years of business. And eventually,
just to build your credit. So you had all the awful interest rates, but you were using it just to build your credit.
Exactly.
Have you ever calculated? I'd be so curious to calculate like how much money you spent when you had the higher interest rates.
An insane amount. People lie to themselves. They really do. Because when you're paying too high of an interest rate, like if you start to look at the math straight on like a vehicle, like 25% on a $25,000 vehicle versus 5%, like you pay an extra $8,000 to $10,000 on just a vehicle. So if you put everything together, like every high credit card rate you have, and your auto insurance is higher because your credit's not good, and then you're renting, right? And then you just
and jobs, like there are some jobs now that pull your credit just to get employed. Like I know in my industry they do because they want to make sure you're good with finances. So they pull your credit just to get employed. You get fingerprinted and your credit is pulled.
Yeah. So, it's funny. You said like, well, like, how did I kind of like get through that? How did I fix it? Like, I think the word momentum is a really important word when it comes to credit. I just had a very special dinner with Tim Story, who's life coach.
Him too. He was amazing.
Is it? Yeah, that's right. I saw that. Life coach to the stars. Tim Story's amazing. To be in his presence.
Oprah.
We just exchanged credit stories, and he exchanged his coaching stories. And he goes, the word that stands out to me with what you're doing right now is like momentum. People need like credit momentum because there's so much pain involved with, I don't want to deal with fixing my credit right now. But if they start to get a little momentum, then all of a sudden stuff starts going well. It's this avalanche.
You mean momentum with paying down credit card debt, or you mean momentum like raising their scores?
Raising their scores. Yep.
And there's so many ways now, right, where people can check their own credit score, like through their bank or through their credit card. But you said something, though, I got to go back for a second, Carl. You said something that you built your credit by having a bunch of credit cards. What if you're just not good with credit cards? Because I've met a lot of people that should not have credit cards.
Yeah, well, I stink with credit cards. Sounds to me like
you might have been one of them.
Yeah, well, I was terrible at credit cards. Listen, I'm only giving you the part one of the story, which is I lost my house. I also lost, a bunch of credit cards at that time and a vehicle. I lost it all. I lost everything. But I taught myself the same way that I teach kids, right? Which is the way that you avoid the credit card trap is like right now it's technology. So like every single one of my credit cards.
I feel the need to take notes on this one.
Good. Every single one of my credit cards is an app. I go right on the app.
Like of the company that.
Exactly. American Express, Chase, Capital One, use their apps. And if you think you have a problem with credit cards, now I don't anymore because I figured it out, right? But if you have a problem with credit cards, what you want to do is prove to yourself, create some good habits, and pay the bill off the very next
What's
day.
one of the good habits? Tell me one.
Well, that's it. You got to pay it off the next day. So if you create the habit of,
You're saying
let's say,
charge it and then pay it off the next day?
like, let's say you spend $100 on your American Express card today. I literally go in there the next day on the American Express app. I hit the button. I pay the thing off in full through the app, which is attached to my bank account, and I have a zero balance. So I create habits, the same habits that I teach my 15-year-old daughter, who happens to have a Capital One credit card at 15, which is, hey, if you're going to the mall and you're going to spend $75, the next day you're handing me $75 and I'm going to pay that. So you're not going to ever carry any of this debt, right?
Okay, but you get until the end of the month. So what you could also do, right, is just set up an automatic payment of the full balance.
One of two things. Yeah, but
I just see an issue with that though, because a lot of times they set it up to pay the full balance, but then by the time they get to the end of the month, the full balance is not there in their bank account.
Exactly. So it's a tough one. That is another tip that I give, which is all my bills are set up on auto pay. So every single bill is set up on auto pay, but the majority of them, it's just, this is a tip for someone that like can't figure out how to manage credit cards. And it's a good thing to have where you have all this buying power at your disposal and you're teaching yourself that you can go out and charge it up and then pay it down the next day.
You really need multiple credit cards though?
Yeah. If I got up from my desk right now, I'd show you my wallet. It's like an old school wallet, like this. There's I don't know, there's 100 credit cards in there.
Why?
Because the more credit cards you have, the higher your scores are going to go. The higher your credit limits are, the higher your scores will go.
Is that true?
Yeah, because 30% of your credit score is based on credit cards. How many do you have? How old are they? And what is your credit limit in relation to what your credit balance is? So I'll give you an example.
Your score is credit cards.
30% of how they come up with a FICO credit score is based on credit cards. So
just how long you've had them.
Yeah, how long you had it, your age of that credit card, but more importantly, what your credit limits are. So if you could have $200,000 in available credit, that's fantastic. And you're managing that between 1 and 10%, you are dominating the credit game. Okay.
Well, but wait a minute. But if you have a high limit, isn't that all the more risk that you are by having a high limit? That's all the more risk exposure that you have.
No. That used to be. So if you go back, remember, I'm an old mortgage guy. So back in the mortgage industry, before this whole bubble hit, if you had too many credit cards, underwriters would look at that and go, well, even though you don't have a balance on this, we're going to assume that you're going to spend money on it. And I'm going to add it into your debt to income ratio and you're not going to qualify. That doesn't happen anymore. So when you look at the mortgage industry, if you don't have a balance on it, or you have a small balance and your payment's $25, that's what shows up in your ratio. So that will not hurt you at all when it comes to the mortgage industry and trying to get a mortgage and trying to get a proof.
Huh. That's interesting to me. So would you recommend to people that they close credit cards that they're not using anymore?
Never.
What?
No,
okay,
because
what if it gets stolen?
Well, then you just call the credit card company up, let it know it's stolen. They'll issue you a new one with a new number on it. So because we'll go to the bucket right below that. So as we're like coming up with this like FICO pie chart that we're defining, 30% is based on how many credit cards you have and how much you have in relation to what your balance is. Your credit limit's really important, but 15% of your score is based on the length of the credit cards. So for the example that you just used, Amy, let's say you had a Capital One credit card that was 12 years old. And let's say you had a Citizens card that was 11 years old and an American Express that was 10 years old. And then all of a sudden, right, you want to close one of those down and get a new card. All the averages get messed up. Okay. So the older those credit cards are, those are assets. I'm going to give the best secret right now for anyone that wants to get into the 800 club. Here's that little known secret, which is you got to have a credit card that is 8 to 10 years old. That's why you'll never, ever, ever see like a 20-year-old with an 800 score unless they piggybacked off of their parents' credit.
What about a loan, a mortgage for 10 years? Not the same thing?
Not the same thing. So when we're talking about the bucket of 30%, which is revolving utilization, and 15%, which is lent, that has nothing to do with a mortgage or a car loan. So you can prepay your mortgage all day long and your scores wouldn't go down at all.
Speaking of a car loan, this is a question that I genuinely do not know. How does a lease versus a loan affect your credit when you go to do a car?
It's the same. Doesn't make a difference.
Really?
Yeah, not gonna impact it at all.
Because
Lease.
I've always thought of this was funny because like when you rent, for instance, if I'm renting an apartment,
Yep.
that doesn't go on my credit. But yet if I rent a vehicle, all of a sudden that's on my credit. It's always been really ridiculous to me.
I know. Well, there's services out there called like rental karma where you can get your rental history to show up. I'm not a big fan of them because you're at the mercy of like your landlord and their perception of what's on time, because technically a mortgage has a 30-day window. If it's due on the 1st of September and you pay it on the 25th, you're fine. But your landlord could say, your payment's due on the 1st of September and you paid it on the 2nd. So I'm going to let Rental Karma know that you were late, and then your credit gets messed up. So it's a dangerous game to play with.
But Rental Karma does allow you to use your apartment rentals or house
100%.
rentals or whatever on your credit.
And it'll retro it back too. So like, let's say you've been renting for 3 years and you're like, whoa, cool, I'm going to use Rental Karma. They can literally go back 3 years and add the whole history right onto your credit report.
Huh.
Which is cool. Yep.
That is pretty cool. But let's talk about renting versus buying for a second. Because me as an advisor, obviously, I think it's good to build assets. So when you're renting, you're using someone else's asset and you're paying someone else to have that asset. So to me, I had this argument actually the other day with an employee of one of my employer plans. She just insists on renting. She just wants to rent because she's like, I just like, knowing that I can get up and leave like whenever I want, and so what would you say to people with renting versus owning in the credit world, what you see? I mean, and now business owner, building wealth, like I know you are not necessarily in that space, but I'm just curious what your opinion is.
Yeah, well, I'll drop another bomb on you. So I'm renting the place that I'm in right now. I have been for the last 12 months.
Wait, business or home?
The home. Now, we're actually closing on it because we ended up getting the deal that we wanted. But I am a big believer in being like mobile. Like I want to be able to move. Like I'm not a guy that thinks that you should buy a primary residence and then sit on it for 20 years and think it's an asset and not do anything with it. So if I buy an asset, it's going to be something that I could like lend against. I could borrow money and do other things with this asset, not just sit there and go, I'm going to fix my house up and I'm going to put a fence around it and I'm going to tell everyone I have this beautiful house, but not have it make me any money.
But you don't think spending like sometimes 25, 35 grand a year to someone else, your job is to use other people's money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Use other people's money to build wealth, to use leverage, as we call it. You're leveraging your money.
Yeah.
But yet you're paying someone else to use that asset. So they're using your money.
Yep. So what happened was the income grew so fast that I didn't want to settle for a place.
Always a good thing.
A year ago. I got in a position where I was like, I just don't want to settle for just anything right now because I'm seeing what's on the horizon in the next 12 months. And I want to make sure if I get in somewhere that I'll be happy there for 5 years. So that was the philosophy there.
But if you are,
let's hear it.
I'm thinking a little slower today, but if you get a mortgage, and you're a mortgage person too, so you get a mortgage, and mortgages are super low right now, like a 15-year. I mean, I think you can still get under 4%, right?
You can. You
secure that money yourself, like you invest it in whatever investment, whether it's a guaranteed CD or whether it's a non-guaranteed stock portfolio or whatever. You have the money.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you can afford it, if you have the income, obviously I am not a proponent of juggling 2 mortgages at once if you cannot afford it.
Yep.
But that's why you do budgets. But if you have the income,
Wait, what was that word?
budget, you don't like budget?
Go ahead. Keep going.
Oh no. Okay. Okay, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. But if you have the money in cash because you chose to invest it because you got an awesome mortgage and now you're making money more than what you're paying, and you have an asset, and you have the cash so you can up and move whenever you want if you wanted to, and you have the income, why wouldn't you do that?
So why didn't I buy a year ago?
Yeah.
Well, just because I just didn't want to settle. Like I have this thing in my life that I refuse to settle for less than, what I want. And I just couldn't get the deal that I wanted.
This is the whole argument with millennials, is that they'd rather rent than own because they don't want to settle.
Yeah.
But you're not really settling. You're just making a financially beneficial decision.
One could argue that,
doesn't mean
first of all, here would be the second argument if we really broke it down. Okay. You could look at what I paid in rent in the last 12 months, and that was always the plan, was just the rent for 12 months. But you could also say that if you look at a amortization schedule on a mortgage, your first 2 years is interest only. So there's nothing there. So yeah, I mean, yes, if there's equity in the house and it changes in a year or two from what you bought it for and there's more equity, you made that money, but you are paying interest only for your first year or two if you look at a 30-year amortization schedule. Now you're talking about 15 and you're paying more principal, okay, than interest on a 15. But if you did a 30-year, it's interest only, and that's not that much different than what I paid in rent.
Good thing I mentioned a 15-year and not a 30-year. No, but I think the majority of people, I would love to hear in your comments right there.
I just have one more thing to add though, too, because there were so many things that went into this decision. Okay. Right. Because that's such a good question, and you can please keep poking because it's good. Because there's a lot that went into that decision, which is why I'm renting, But part of it is I'm on such a roll with my business that we were going to build a house, and then it just got into this complicated thing. And then we couldn't find remember the inventory was low a year ago, 6 months ago. It was really low. Well, you can't remember because I'm in PA, but the inventory was low. Okay. And we were going to build a house, and I'm like, I don't want to be involved with something that's going to sidetrack me from what I'm doing right now. Like, I am so on fire with this business and my brand and my book and my course. And I'm like, this is all a distraction. Okay. So,
oh my gosh, it would distract me to have a landlord. Like, maybe it's just a personality thing, but it would distract me knowing that I'm living in a place that isn't mine. That's a distraction every day when I come home and it's not mine. Great. So I wanted to ask everybody to put comments out there, because the point is that when you rent, you always say, oh, it's because it's temporary. I'm only going to rent for 12 months, or I'm going to rent just because I don't know where I'm going. But then you end up renting for a lot longer.
And that's what I did, because our closing's actually next Friday at 2 p.m. So that's exactly, we ended up buying. We did the opposite of what you're saying, though. But yes, most people get comfortable and they rent 5 years, forever. 10. I'll tell you what my audience is. They're 10 years. They're 10-year people that they have the same story. They've been renting for 10 years, and you're like, oh, that's a long time. So
much money.
Rent and waste. Yep.
Gone. Especially time value of money. If I had my financial calculator somewhere, but if you put in all that money that you were using on rent into an account and invested it, granted, obviously there's risk and then it can go up and down. And this is not a recommendation, by the way, but I'm just thinking out loud. But the numbers on that, depending on what your rent is, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
100%.
Does Carl recommend a way to haggle with credit card companies to reduce balances? Okay, we'll get to that in 1 second. We have a question that came in. But I want to go back to budget. You sneered your face at the word budget. Why?
I'm all about finding a way to increase revenue. That's what I'm about. A certain lifestyle, a certain dollar amount that I want to spend.
You don't think you should have a budget though to grow?
Hell no. No. That's the way I am right now. That might change. I'm more about a percentage of my money that I want to put away. Okay. So like
Okay.
the way,
Okay. So that's in a way a budget.
so in a way, a budget. Okay.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a
yeah. Okay.
how can I continue to increase the amount of money that goes into a specific account that I can't touch, that I'm only buying assets with. Okay. So that's my little philosophy on that. But I'm so focused on revenue and making more money and pushing everything I have in on myself in this business. So I don't think about budget. I don't, like you and I talked before the show. I'll
Yeah.
be spending some very large marketing dollars in
Yes.
September. And anyone else, I think if you came in and looked at my financial situation, you go, Carl, how about you wait until January? No chance. There's no chance. There's no chance.
Oh no. So you like to, we talked about this before the show too, spend other people's money. Like you are okay with going out there and getting debt and then using that money to put into your business, right?
And now it's either assets, right, in real estate or my business, but majority of it is
Okay, see that I'm okay with, like good debt, like putting it into assets that can make you money. Putting it into business, though, I feel like there has to be an acceptable limit. Like there has to be a place where you laugh and smile, but there's so many times that you can't predict the future and life happens and here you are up a creek because you over leveraged yourself. You hear about that all the time.
Yeah.
You have to admit.
But
I'm betting your credit, but then you're going to destroy your credit if you can't pay your bills.
But I'm betting on Carl, and I'm betting on business credit, which is separate. So God forbid something happens and there's no personal guarantee on this. I could walk away from my business right now and still have great personal credit. So
Okay.
You're talking about business credit that is not personally guaranteed. That, listen, I just assess risk different than someone else. And Amy, it took me a long time to get there, right? So it's a good conversation because I wasted money. I shared this story maybe one other time before, but I blew through $150,000 one time on radio ads because I was so convinced in my head that I could because there's a lot of credit repair companies in that space.
Mm-hmm.
They are in that space, and you're like
quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah, like, okay, it's got to be working. They're running ads every 2 seconds to fix your credit. And I went through $150,000 in radio ads, and I was like, what the hell just happened? So I've done that before.
Wow.
But the reason I'm more aggressive now, how I arrived at where I'm at, is I'm so confident that, where I'm going, how many people, when I see the amount of people that either need to fix their credit or want to know how to get their credit operating at that, like the highest level, so they can leverage other people's money and create real wealth. Because before it was always about, well, there's a big part of the population that needs to fix it. But now when you see the people that are saying, how do I get it up?
How do I get to the highest level? Because the difference in interest rates is huge. If you're just joining us, by the way, I'm here with my friend Credit Carl, CEO and founder of Credit Blueprint, where he helps people repair credit and build credit. And we're just getting into some different things here. We've talked about a whole bunch of stuff already, but I want to go back to this question because it actually ties into what we were just talking about, business credit versus personal credit. So let's say the business has no credit, right? It's fairly new. So you try to build credit, you use your personal credit, right? For your business at first.
Yep.
And then you can try to build, once you're starting to make money, you go get a mortgage in the business, you start to build business credit. And so you try to take the business money and pay off the personal credit. How do you recommend that you manage personal credit versus business credit? What's an effective way to manage that?
Right. So a couple questions in there. One, I'm okay with somebody using their personal credit to get started. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that as long as the game plan is to transition out of your personal credit and transition into using business credit. So it's okay. I did it myself. I had to charge up a bunch of things to try to make this company work. And I know
Carl gives Credit Blueprint a loan, right? A personal loan. Okay.
Exactly. So I know so many business owners that never transition from all of this personal debt that they're building their business with, and they don't know how to get business, credit, and they never make the transition, and their personal credit score suffers because of it. So the easy way for someone to do that is to start with a credit card, a business credit card. So like the rule of thumb is you want to have a 680 to 700 personal score in order to get business credit cards.
Okay.
Now, I recommend American Express. That's the best credit card company on the planet.
Yeah,
Bottom line, I know nobody that's better. And they want a 700 personal score. And then you can take that, right? And that, believe it or not, like my Amex card, if you saw my balance right now, you'd lose it. But it's a charge card where I charge it up and I pay it down. Like there's no, you wouldn't see it balance, but it doesn't show up on my personal credit. So that's an easy transition for someone that has a business that's carrying personal debt. You get the Amex card, or you get the Chase has an awesome card, which is the Chase Ink Preferred. Great card. Right now, like this is another site. Like I start a lot of my mornings with a site called uscreditcardguide.com. I have no affiliation with them.
US Credit Guide?
uscreditcardguide.com. That's a great site. Now, this site gets paid to push different cards, but they did all the homework for you. So if you want to know what the best business cards are, go to the site. And they will literally say, here's the top 10 cards. And you look for cards that have like bonuses, like the Chase Ink Preferred is 100,000 sign-on bonus right now for a $95 annual fee. Fantastic, right?
Yeah. But how do you recommend? So let's say I do rack up a bunch of credit on the business, or a bunch of debt on the business. And now I want to go settle credit cards. So this goes back to the question. So if I want to settle credit cards, right, because I got to get this debt down, the interest rates are out of control, you're bleeding. And I've actually had some clients come in with this exact situation. You're bleeding money because your interest rates are crazy. And it's on the business side.
Yep.
Right? So now your business credit is suffering.
Yep.
The only way to really get out of that cycle is to settle credit cards on the business side, but your business credit sucks, for lack of a better term.
But why does it suck? Because they're still paying the bills, though. If they're paying the bills,
they're maxed out. You're maxed out on a bunch of credit cards.
Yeah, they can probably get a small business loan. So, like, listen, you're never going to settle credit card debt unless you have like leverage and you have the money in the bank to say, on this one card, I owe you $25,000. Like, there's no getting a credit card company to settle unless you have what I would call chunky money. So on a $25,000 card, if you had $18,000 in cash and said, I got 18, would you take that? That's the only way you're going to get a credit card company to settle. Otherwise, they're going to go, well, no, like you're still paying us right now. Why would I ever settle $25,000?
You have to default. You have to kind of go late on the payments.
You've got to default. You have to default. And I would never give anyone that advice. But if you did default and you were 6 months behind and you ignored them, then you'd have the next piece of leverage. Hey, I'm never going to pay you again.
I've called with clients, though, that are not in default and they do settle. Maybe not as aggressively, maybe not half the balance like they would if they're late and haven't gotten any money in 6 months. But they are willing to settle maybe 20% of the balance.
Yep.
And the problem is you can't go get a business loan without a ton of income, especially if you've got a ton of debt on the business.
Yeah.
So then you got to take a personal loan.
Yeah.
And you take the personal loan money and settle those credit cards. And now you've got personal debt again.
Damn, we're back to this person that needs to make more money, though.
Okay. All right. Well,
we're back to this person that, to me, maybe stopped betting on themselves. But you're thinking they got in over their head, and I'm going, I don't know, man. Like, what happened with the business that it didn't work out? Why are they not making more money?
Okay.
Why?
But yeah, and I get that. And I know that that's available to everybody. Like whether you are in a struggle with debt or not in a struggle with debt, everybody can go out and just make more money. Like I get that. But when you're in a financial situation, a lot of times, like you said it great. You said financial momentum. Like you got to get some momentum. So I feel like, boom, you go get some personal debt. You get a personal loan, you start settling those credit cards, you get a better interest rate, and you start getting out of debt. And then we figure out how to use it correctly and use leverage. But you got to get out of that negative cycle, right? Or are you disagreeing still?
I am, because I'm not looking back. Like to me, you start to read people's books like Tim Grover and Relentless, and you talk about some of the great ones out there, which is who I like to mirror. They don't think. Okay. They just react. I feel the same way with my business. Like if I just stopped for the weekend and drank wine all weekend and looked at like some of the debt, I go, oh my, what are you doing? Like, but I'm betting on myself and the industry that I'm in and where I'm going.
Oh my gosh,
so,
you're like giving me a headache. I always say, like, be proactive, not reactive. And you're like, just react. Go make a ton of mistakes and then just figure it out.
You learn. Listen, I had to spend that $150,000 on radio ads. I mean, people are probably like, "What?" Like, I had to get through that, and I'll tell you why. Because I was convinced in my mind that radio was going to work, and I had to go through that. There was nobody on this planet that was going to tell me it wasn't working.
You were wrong.
Well, was I really wrong? Because what those other companies had, I realized was a bigger budget. That's like me competing.
Well,
Like that's like me competing with like Lexington Law on Google and SEO. They dominate the whole first page. They always have for a long time. Creditrepair.com dominates radio ads because I bet you they're spending $1 million a month. So I can't compete with that. But they can't compete with a personality brand in this space because no one's in front of their company.
Okay. All right. So
I got no competition.
You technically don't have any competition. That's why I always say we don't have any competition. If you're just joining us, I'm here with Credit Carl from Credit Blueprint. We're talking all things credit today. So obviously repairing credit and building credit. So let's talk back about repairing credit, because you and I talked a little bit before too about like people that have awful credit scores and then they get 25% interest rates. What's the first step to repairing credit?
Well, you got to get rid of the old collection accounts. Okay. So you can't just wait around like most people do for 7 years. And they're like,
I mean, get them off the credit report.
Get them off the credit report.
Okay.
Off the credit report. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do that.
Room on my board. So now I have to write somewhere else. Okay. Keep going.
This is not good. Write it on the palm of your hand.
What I used to doing.
Right. So there's a couple ways that people can get old negative collection accounts off the credit report. They can go directly through the credit bureaus like Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. There's a button on there. It says dispute. I say that you don't have a lot of great success doing that. You can send your own letters out. You can go online and print like a stock letter that says, I'm using the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and I would like this collection account removed.
Okay.
Or you can use a professional company that will send the letters out for you to get the debt removed.
And that's what you do, right? You help with that.
We help with that. The number one mistake that I see people make when they're ready to rebuild their credit is they start to pay creditors from the past. So the book that we're writing right now is Default Your Way to Wealth, which means, if you have debt that you let fall behind a year ago or 2 years ago, the worst thing that you can do is pay that debt, because you're admitting guilt to the credit bureaus. You're putting a big fat stamp on it, validating the fact that you didn't pay that company for 2 years.
But you either did or you didn't pay. Like, you're already guilty.
Well, no, because you can make that, like, if you're like, for example, if you do the opposite, let's say you don't take my advice and you're like, Carl, I didn't pay someone 2 years ago. I'm going to pay them because morally I feel like I should. The credit bureau, the credit scores, that you will not get rewarded for that. So I've had customers spend $5,500 of a tax refund, spend all of it paying collections from 2 years ago, and the scores drop 50 points.
What if it's not in collections yet? So like I have, okay.
Totally different. You asked me, someone's looking to fix their credit that messed it up.
So you said settle collections.
Yeah. So you want to not settle collections, and you want to get those collections removed off of the credit report because they're old. Okay.
So you wouldn't recommend first step going out there, and if you have a huge credit card balance, let's say your balance is 25 grand and you owe $25,050, you would not recommend calling them up and being like, look, I'll give you 20 grand. You go out there and get a personal loan for 12% instead of 27%, and you settle with them.
Can I use the word hell?
Okay. Yeah.
Hell no, I would not do that.
I think you already did.
No, you want to default your way to wealth, because I'm going to say these words are really.
Default your way to wealth.
I'm going to say these words are really important. Okay.
Okay.
Credit scores are king. And what I mean by that is, if they are not going to reward you, when I say they, the credit bureaus and FICO, if they're not going to reward you and increase your scores to pay a collection account that you had from 2 years ago, why the heck would you call that company and settle and pay them any money? Okay. It's just the way it works, whether it's right or wrong, whatever it is. The bottom line is credit scores are king. And the way you borrow other people's money is you got to have a 700 or an 800 credit score in order to borrow other people's money. Okay. They look at scores first. Banks look at your credit scores.
So if it's a pretty high balance though, you can still get that off of your credit?
100%. Don't matter. Doesn't matter if it's 2,000. Doesn't matter if it's 200. Doesn't matter if it's 25,000. It's based on how old it is. See, these credit card companies, it's all unsecured. So if it's 25,000 with Capital One 2 years ago, there's a 90% chance that Capital One sold that debt to a third party. They wrote it off. There's maybe there's a 1099 involved. And now the third party tries to collect for 6 months and you ignore them. And then they sell it to the next company. And then there's all these companies involved, So like, do you still owe that money? Does that third company that bought the debt still trying to collect on it? And do you owe it? Yes. But I'd want to know what the statute of limitations is in your area. Like for Pennsylvania, it's 4 years. So if the debt's 4 years old and you're in PA, that company they can't do anything. Whatever they were going to do, like freeze your bank account.
Can't they take you to court?
Not after the statute of limitations runs.
Oh, not after the statute of limitations. Okay.
So before that, there's a little bit of risk involved, but I still wouldn't pay them because if they're going to do something, that's why I use the example of a year or two. Capital One's going to do something aggressively in the first 6 months.
Yes, for sure.
Outside of a year or two, and they sold it. They don't care anymore. Like it has less and less impact because they wrote it off. It was unsecured, and they figured we're never getting our money.
Okay, so what about accounts that aren't in collection? So you're currently behind. Like let's say it's a car loan, and you're way behind on the car payments. Mm-hmm. You suggest not catching up on the car payments, or you suggest letting it get repoed, or what do you suggest there?
That is an example that's right in the middle, right? So like somebody that's 2 years behind that you just gave, or we said somebody has bad credit and the worst is behind them. That's a great candidate for my program. And my advice is let's ignore people from the past. Let's get them off the report and let's start getting you some new positives. Now, the example you're giving is somebody that's currently going through something right now that I wouldn't have any advice on other than maybe you need to find a way to get caught back up and negotiate with the car company to stop the bleeding, So like that's more financial advice than credit advice. That's the same question. We talked about this before. Brad Lee asked me what would you do if someone had $10,000 in debt and their expenses outweighed their income? I can't help that person. I can't help them.
You're going to tell them to make more money is what you're going to do.
But they got to find a way to get that caught up or just let it go. I mean, if you're 6 months behind on an auto, boy, that's a difficult position to be in. And it sounds like they're currently going through something.
Yeah. Okay. So let's wrap it up because we've already been going at this for 45 minutes. And I mean, everybody is still staying tuned. So this is really great content. But anything that you want to leave people with, like tell people about your program, tell people where to find you. I'm also going to post this on our podcast on the Wooditch Network, the Nova Wealth Show. So it'll be on iTunes, the Nova Wealth Show, and then also on the Wooditch Network. I'll post it there. So it'll be video and audio. But tell people how they can get a hold of you and tell a little bit about your program, Carl.
Yeah, the website's always good, creditblueprint.net. I'm very active on Instagram. I do a daily show. People interact with me. They come on live, which is credit.carl. So find me on Instagram, follow me, ask me a credit question. I give a lot away for free. We actually have our credit course, which is creditcockyonline.com. We're doing a sale this weekend. Labor Day, you put the promo in there. You'll find it on my Instagram. And you get the whole credit course for $297. It's a steal if you want to fix credit or get the best, get an 800 score yourself.
Nice. That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time on a Friday on Labor Day weekend for doing this. I appreciate it so much. We gave so much good content. Again, I'm going to summarize in a YouTube video and I'll post it in the comments in case you don't have time to watch the whole 45-minute video, but it's so important that people get all this information that you give. You are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great long weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me on the show, Amy.